Forrester, Hunter for Multi-Man Publishing Games. Welcome to another video of my Metal on Metal. We're talking about the Grand Tactical Combat series, and specifically, this is the third video in a series of tutorials trying to get some of you guys up to speed without having to read through 2 or 3 rule books on how to play the Grand Tactical Combat series. We'll be looking at fire combat. It's going to be a long one. Sorry, there's lots to cover. But I imagine many of you guys are playing these games because you like to shoot stuff, so hopefully it'll be of some interest. Here are the various things we're going to cover. Line of sight. As in many tactical games, units can fire at a range greater than 1. We'll talk about the various fire types in this game, and then there are lots. Some of the modifiers that are involved in fire combat, what happens, what kind of results you can get. Then we'll look at mortars and artillery as well as opportunity fire. So we have a lot of ground to cover. First off, let's work with line of sight. Unlike a game, say, like the Tactical Combat series, the TCS, you don't actually have elevations in this game. You have some effects that simulate that, but you don't actually have to calculate elevation, and you don't have to do elevation-based line of sight checks. So many of you guys will be very happy about that. It's fairly straightforward. There is blocking terrain in this. As you can imagine, something like towns or hedgerows or woods will block line of sight, trace line of sight from one hex dot to the other. If the line of sight crosses blocking terrain, it's blocked. No big shocks there. One innovation here, at least to me is an innovation. If you're firing perhaps from this hex to this hex, what happens if blocking terrain is on the spine? If blocking terrain is only on one side, it's a free line of sight, you can see. But if you've got, I'm not see if I can find a hex here that will simulate that, but if you've got blocking terrain that covers a hex side of one and then one on the opposite side, then the line of sight is blocked. I'm looking at the map here and seeing if I can come up with an example like that, and I don't see one right off. But the basic idea is, if we're firing from here, say to this hex, if this is blocking terrain, and then if this hex right here were blocking terrain, where it'd be along the spine but on the other side, then the line of sight is blocked. So that's a little detail to remember. There are hex side features such as ridges here that will block line of sight, as long as if the firer or the target is adjacent and the line of sight is crossing it right before the target or right after the fire, then it's not blocked. So a unit here could shoot across this ridge, no problem. Likewise, if a unit was sitting here, anybody over here would be able to trace a line of sight to it. However, if a unit were here and here, that is not adjacent to this line, then the line of sight is blocked. Crests are a little funky. A crest is right down here. A crest functions like a ridge. So yes, the terrain looks elevated, but there are no elevation effects in this game. Just consider that as part of the artistic expression of this map. How do ridges work differently than crests? Well, it's like a crest. If a fire is adjacent to a crest, it can shoot through it, and likewise, if a target is adjacent to a crest, it can be fired at. However, a line of sight cannot cross 2 crests, no matter what. So, if a unit were here and a unit were here, this line of sight is blocked. If these were ridges, it would not be blocked. A ridge would be here, a ridge would be there, and since the ridge was adjacent to the fire and to the target, that's okay. Crests don't function that way. 2 crests block the line of sight no matter what. Both ridges and crests will block the line of sight along the spine. That's how this game works. So, one thing to add to this, the normal spotting range is 8. You can see anything within 8 as long as it's not night or there's not bad weather, etc. However, if a unit is occupying an observation post, and you can see that indicated by the sign here, 2 things happen, 2 things that are good. First of all, the line of sight is extended to 13 hexes. And by the way, for an observation post, that's only for spotting for indirect fire. We'll get into that later in this video. You can see 13, which is nice. In addition, the line of sight can enter or cross 3 blocked hexes or hex sides and still have a valid line of sight. What, you ask? If a target were here, normally the line of sight would be blocked by this blocking terrain. However, since it occupies an observation post, it may ignore up to 3 hexes and hex sides to determine line of sight. So this unit can see that. And in fact, if a unit were here, it would also be a fair target for spotting for indirect fire there. These observation posts can see well into towns. They can observe the beach, which is to the north here. So as the Allied and German players, this is something that was new to me. It took me a while to get used to these observation posts because I was used to blocking terrain, blocking the line of sight. So it takes some careful examining of the map to see how far these units can truly spot. Hills are even better. Here's a hill feature right here, nicely labeled as a hill. It also has a range of 13. And in addition, this is not just for indirect fire. Units on this hill can ignore up to 3 blocking terrain hex sites. What does this mean? You like to put strong units with a long range on top of a hill so they can reach out and touch your opponent at will. So hilltops are extremely important in this game. This is something that also took me a little while to get used to in this system. Last point, strong points. There's another terrain point called strong point. I don't have any here. It has a normal line of sight of 8 hexes, but it may ignore 2 blocking hexes or hex sides, and also functions for direct fire. So you can put tanks or 88s or some long-range anti-tank weapon there and give it an extended ability to fire at units that cannot fire back. So the line of sight in this situation is not reciprocal. If I'm on the hill and I'm spotting a unit here across the ridge, I can see it, but it cannot see me because it doesn't occupy a hillside. So it's kind of a one-way thing, and thus, as I say, these hexes are really, really important in this game. As a final note, we'll get to it when we do indirect fire. Sometimes these observation points are destroyed. If you rubble this hex, and rubble happens when you fire indirect fire into a hex and you get a 0, then it turns into rubble, and that destroys the observation posts. However, hills cannot be rubbled in this game. Let's look at fire types. I have 9 listed here. I think that's how many there are. Running through them briefly, we have 9 units exemplifying them, and the color code here, the color inside the box, indicates the fire type. So not the color of the letter, which should be black or white in most cases, but the box itself. White is the best. This is a mix of anti-tank and high explosives. And these are the ones you really like. They do the most damage. Small arms, armor piercing, which is better against armor targets than unarmored targets. Light mortars, which don't hit very hard, and these are only in this game with allied units. The nice thing about light mortars is that units with this purple color can fire during a divisional activation without spending a command point. So you can have a whole line of infantry, and normally units will only fire during their unit activation because it's the most cost-effective way to do it. However, these guys can all fire during the divisional activation too, which in effect doubles the amount of time they can fire for free, and that's quite handy for the ally player. They don't hit hard, but they hit often. Mortars are similar to a lot of the other indirect fire weapons. We'll look at those in a minute. And when we look at the table, you'll see that these are often very similar to one another. They're colored, mainly the color will dictate what kind of special rules they have, when they can fire, opportunity to fire, etc., etc., etc. So there's all the types. Remember, when you look at the combat results table, you can, as we're going to look at in a minute, you can simply line up the color of the box and then see what the result will be. In fact, let's look at it right now. This is 1/2 of the fire table, the combat results table. This is the one for unarmored targets. There's another one that's very similar, but with some subtle differences for armored targets. The combat is based on a 10-sided die, with a 0 being 0. A 0 will always hit, a 9 will always miss. Otherwise, you calculate whether you get a hit or not based on the fire strength. So if this is a 3, its normal number it needs to hit is a 3 or less. There are naturally modifiers for this. In other words, 5, that's good. You want a big, strong number for here. And as we look at the table, you'll see that when we get near the end of the table, we get some better results. C's are okay. 1s mean step losses. You like those when you're shooting. E's mean eliminate, and you like those even better. So the game's kind of interesting that way, I think, that you have your 2-hit number, but it also helps determine the strength of the hit, because the higher the number, the much higher is the effect that your fire can have on the target. Here's the similar table for the armored or entrenched, and what you'll notice, I'm going to switch back and forth here real quickly. This is against unarmored, and you see for indirect fire weapons, there are 1s, 1-step losses. And then over here, there's C's, which are cohesion hits. When we look at the armored thing, we'll see they're kind of switched a little bit. They're just C's here. There's not the 1-steps, and the 1-steps don't happen until much later. This is important. Armored targets are much more survivable. They're not going to get plinked away by artillery with your opponent rolling a 0 to inflict step losses. By the same token, you can take soft targets that are unarmored targets, and if you entrench them, they're treated like armored targets for this table. That's a really, really important thing to remember in this game. You like to have your infantry sitting in entrenchments when possible. Kind of makes sense, but this table dictates that because they'll just take cohesion hits instead of losing steps. Let's look at the actual combat results. C is a cohesion hit, and here's a marker that indicates a cohesion hit. The markers will show the modifiers on the units underneath them right here on the display, and these numbers are put right where the values go. And I think that's a handy feature. So here, -1 means -1 to fire strength. -1 here means -1 to close assault strength. That's for a cohesion hit. I don't have it displayed here, but there's a marker for 2 cohesion hits, and that's a -2 and a -2 here, obviously, and then a -1 to the quality rating. A unit can take 2 cohesion hits, and it suffers the modifiers, but nothing happens directly to it. A unit can also be suppressed. This is a little bit a different result. When it's suppressed, it cannot fire, has a -1, it cannot move, and essentially cannot do anything until it recovers some suppression. Units can also suffer 1 step loss. These little bullets, these little dots, indicate the number of steps in a unit. That's a 1-step unit. These are 2-step units. And down here, there is no dot. That is a 0-step unit. A 0-step unit is destroyed whenever it suffers a cohesion hit or obviously a step loss or an elimination. Units that have cohesion hits can recover from those by rally. We'll talk about that in another video. But once you have 2 cohesion hits, if you take another cohesion hit, it turns into a step loss. So that means when you've got units at 2 cohesion hits, they become vulnerable to elimination. It's usually a good idea to either help them recover or get them out of the line of sight so they have a little time to recover. When you suffer an S, a suppressed result, if you wish, you can try to convert it into a cohesion hit. Why would you do that? Suppressed units can't shoot at all, and they actually have no fire zone, so they're very susceptible to assault, which I'll talk about in another video. So sometimes it's okay to leave your guys suppressed, but sometimes you want to try to just turn it into a cohesion hit instead. There's pros and cons, as you'll see when you play this game. You can spend a command point to do it, or you can roll against the quality rating, see if you can do it without spending a command point. That's a little risky if it's really important, but if it's not that important, you want to save yourself the command point. In other words, if this guy here were to receive a suppressed result, he could roll, and if he rolls a 6 or less, he can convert it to a cohesion hit. You can also spend a command point to convert one of these S question mark results, which means a possible suppression. And in these cases, normally, if you don't spend a command point, you just roll a die against its quality rating, and if it makes it, it's fine. If it doesn't, it becomes suppressed. For instance, if this unit were to take an S- result, let's just say it's not so important to the Germans, so he rolls a 5, no suppression. If he rolled to 7 or higher, he would be suppressed, and then if he wanted to, he could try to convert that suppression into a cohesion hit. Now, what are some of the modifiers to direct fire? Normally, it's that hit number. The fire strength will dictate sort of if you get a hit. So if you have fire strength of 4, you get a hit on a 0, 1, 2, 3, or 4. The first thing you can check when you're doing direct fire and indirect fire both, but not opportunity fire, is for the company bonus. Let me switch back here. Units that have 2 steps left are full companies, and they are eligible for company bonus. Units with 1 step or 0 steps are not eligible for this bonus. To do so, you roll against your quality rating, and if you make it, you get a +2 to your fire strength. So let's think about that for a minute. If we were to go back to these units, and this is a 4, and it makes its quality rating, it is now a 6. And if we go back to the fire table, you'll see these are some nice results that it's adding into its ability. In other words, this is pretty important deal, this company bonus. And you'll find, especially your big hitters, maybe a strength 6 or strength 7, white firing units, such as big tanks that have 2 steps, they can get up into the 8, 9 territory, which is really, really strong. So that's the quality rating. And you have to check the troop quality to see if it passes, and you cannot spend a command point to do that. You'll subtract, usually, sometimes add modifiers based on the terrain the target occupies. Range. This depends on whether the target is unarmored or armored. If it's unarmored, it's -1 for each range beyond 1 hex. Pretty straightforward. This one's a little odd. Against armored targets, If it's adjacent, it's no modifier. If it's at your maximum range, and your maximum range is greater than 1, it's -2. So if you have a range of 4 and you're firing at 4, it's -2. Anything in between is -1. Which means, let's suppose you have a unit with a range of 4, a white fire. At range 1, there's no modifier. At range 2, it's -1. At range 3, it's -1. It's the same. And at range 4, its maximum range, it's -2. So this means that firing against armored, you don't lose so much for the range. The longer the range, the worse effect it has on the fire, the better effect on the defender for unarmored targets versus armored targets. Subtract the defense rating of a unit as well. And then you can check the stacking in the hex. Normally, 8 is sort of the max. You can go beyond that, but it leads to problems. You can get up to a +3 for stacking, and then night, obviously. And some of the markers that are on the fire will affect it. So let's take a look at the terrain effects chart real quickly. You'll find here that there's a split column, one for unarmored and one for armored, and things range from the +1, which is bad for the defender, up to even a -4 for fortified, but usually -1 or -2 is normal. And the effects are ameliorated for armored. That is, that usually they don't get as much benefit and they don't lose as much negative. Let's take a look at, let's work through some examples of doing fire combat. We're going to use the Vassal module as I've done in these videos. So here we are at Vassal. I've just set up some counters to look at. This is sort of as would be happening in the morning of the invasion turn. We have some Allied units here and some German units there. Big surprise. So if it's the Germans' turn, let's take a turn firing with some Germans. Let's say they have an activation. They're activating the 736 so they can fire with these units. And sure, why not? We'll take some shots. So let's just look at these Grenadiers, and this Ost battalion or company will be firing at this target here. I'm going to use the wizard, which will show us the modifiers, but to walk it through briefly, we're going to fire. We have a strength of 4. We have a company, so we'll roll for a company bonus, and then we will subtract here the terrain, which is going to be a -2 for woods for this unit. So when we're doing it in our heads, that's going to be 4. Then we'll roll for a company bonus, which might give us up to 6, and we're going to subtract 2 here. So let's pull up the wizard, which is really a nice thing. And we're going to go through the attack like this. So here's our target, and this brings up the table, and it discusses exactly what I just mentioned there. Now, there's this night bonus here. Why is that on there? Because I forgot to change, let's see, the turn. There, that will get rid of it. We'll start it again. And we'll bring up the wizard again and attack. So those are the bonuses like I mentioned. There's just basically a -2. And this is direct fire, so we're going to roll for a company bonus. He needs to roll his quality rating. This is showing a -2. It's not true. It should be. Okay, that's why. 1 second. I'm going to change the division chart. I pulled this up at the beginning of the game when there's... oops, that's not what I want. Let's add... All right, you're learning how the Vassal module functions too. So, right, we're going to roll for a company bonus. We need to roll a 4 or less. The roll is a 2. It's successful. So our strength is now really a 6. And it's going to be -2 for the woods, so it's a net result of 4. Our roll is a 0. That's good. That's a cohesion hit. So I'm going to inflict a cohesion hit on this target right there. It's now -1 in its firing abilities. And this unit is done. Now, let's fire with this unit. And it's going to be a little worse because it bases it 1. Let's roll for company bonus. Let's see if we get it. We do with a roll of 3. It needed a 3, so we need to roll a 3. And we roll, and then we have now a possible suppression on a 1. So this unit gets to decide, all right, we might be suppressed. We can roll against our quality rating, or we can spend a command point. At this point, there's no way I'm going to spend a command point for just this little unit. It's much more important things to do. So we need to roll its quality rating. It's going to be a -1 because it hasn't cleared the beach yet. So that's going to be 5. We'll roll the die. It rolls a 1. No effect. If I had rolled a 6 or higher, he would have been suppressed, and then if he had wanted to, he could have converted that suppression into a cohesion hit, which I probably would not have done here, right? So that's an example of some small arms doing direct fire, and they rolled pretty well. Good for them. Let's perhaps say the Germans are activating now, and they get to fire this unit here. Let's take a look at that. It's a base 4, -3 defense, so it's not going to do too much. And since it only has one step, I'm not going to be able to roll for a company bonus. So it's going to be pretty low odds attack. Should be about a 1, right? Why do we have to... Oh, this has a... very interesting. The module thinks it's just a -3, so there's a little issue with the module here. Interesting. I'm going to report that. So we're going to give it another -1 here because it should be a 4 -3 for a 1. No company bonus, open terrain, no other modifiers, no effect. So that's kind of a low odds attack. Not sure I would have bothered with that one. Let's do some attacking the other way around. Here we have, say it's the allied activation, say these tanks are going and it wants to take a shot here. All right, let's pull up the wizard. It's going to be a base 4. It will be rolling for company bonus, and the hedgerow is going to give a -1. So it starts at a 3. Let's select direct. Let's roll for company bonus. We rolled a 6. That failed. It needed to roll 4. We'll roll the die. A 7. No effect. Did absolutely nothing. Likewise, these won't be such big surprises. This starts at a 4. It's a -1 for the cohesion hit. We'll pull up the attack. 3. Now, here you see there's a +1 defense, so these are easier to hit. They're not very good troops. They melt under fire. So it's going to be a base 2. 4 for this, -1 for the cohesion hit, -2 for the hedgerow, but +1 for the lousy defense rating. It's going to be a 2 base. We get a roll for the company bonus. We failed on a 6, and it's a possible suppression result. Here, as the German, I might very well expend a command point to keep him from being suppressed. We'll just say I do that. This unit will also take a shot. It's a base 4. All right, -2 for the hedgerow, +1 for the defense. Let's roll for the company bonus. Nothing. We roll the die. Another possible suppression point. Now the German says, I've spent enough. I'm going to roll it. And the roll is a 2, and they survive. They make it, so there's no suppression result on it. Okay, that's just a few examples of direct fire, a normal direct fire. Let's now take a look at mortars and organic artillery. They are indicated by the fire strength. Green is a mortar, brown is organic artillery. These units don't have to have a line of sight. They can use another unit to trace the line of sight from, as long as that unit is in command and part of the formation of the firing unit, and then it can use them as spotters and it can fire at them. The nice thing about... And there's two nice things about mortars and organic artillery and artillery in general. First of all, is that they can fire indirect, so you can use a spotter. You can keep these guys with their long range out of harm's way. Second of all, they create barrage markers, which are indicated right here in 2 forms, light barrage or heavy barrage. These mess up with the enemy unit, and also any enemy unit under a barrage, or we'll just say any unit under a barrage marker, has a maximum range of 1. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute. Really important. If this unit were under a barrage marker, it could not shoot at this unit. And so this allows you to move around to stay out in the open, keeping the enemy unit suppressed or at least under barrages so that they can't fire at range. Really, really important tactic in this game. So, right. Now, how do you know what kind of barrage? If the strength is less than 6, it's a light barrage, and if it's 6 or greater, it's a heavy barrage. So basically, the bigger units, if they get the company bonus, here's a 4. If it were to get the company bonus, its base strength would be 6, and it would create a heavy barrage. Heavy barrages both of these cost 2 movement points to leave, but the even greater deal with heavy barrages, if units have to make a quality roll to even get out from under the heavy barrage, and if you leave a heavy barrage in your movement, you take a cohesion hit automatically. So it's pretty brutal. When you're under a heavy, you'll find that there's not a whole lot your units can do other than wait it out. Barrage markers are removed at the end of every turn. Barrage markers also block line of sight. So how does it work? If this mortar wanted to fire, it is, the line of sight from here to here is blocked, but it can use these units from its formation, and these units can spot for it, and it can fire. One nice thing also about indirect firing units, such as mortars, organic artillery, and other artillery, is that they're not affected by range. Range does not have a negative effect, so that's nice too. Let's look at artillery. Very similar to those two. However, the process to actually fire is fussier. There are lots of artillery units in this game. And they have some flexibility, but they also are a little difficult to set up. In order for an artillery unit to shoot, and that's these orange firing types, each orange fire has a contact marker. This is sort of its radio fire observation unit, whatever you call that. Whoever's the forward observer, right? Whoever's spotting for that artillery. So what happens is at the beginning of the turn, you'll have artillery units. In order for them to fire, they have to be organized into what are called artillery parks. These are markers that you put on the map. An artillery mark can contain any number of artillery units. Once the units are actually in the park, and a park costs 1 dispatch point to form, then they can have their spotters go out to leaders. So here's a leader of this formation. This is a 21st Panzer. This is Luck, and his units are, the brown striped guys. At the beginning of the turn, you can have, say, Luck wants to use some artillery, so he's going to try to get into contact with a number of artillery units. In order to do so, he has to roll the contact number. Here, the contact pending means it's not attached to anybody yet. In contact means it's already attached to a leader. The contact pending number has a 6. At the beginning of the turn, before any activations, he'll roll a die. If it gets a 6 or less, this artillery unit is now in contact with Luck. If you roll a 7, 8, or 9, it's not in contact, and nobody else can use it this turn. So this means that when you have a bunch of artillery, usually about a third of it is sitting around doing nothing because there's no contact markers. They're not in contact with the leader. So let's just say that Luck has someone like this in contact. This unit's in contact. Anytime that this formation activates, once during its activation when that formation is pulled, any unit in command by Luck can spot for this unit, and it can take a shot. Now, we've talked about before, leaders have a number of units that they can activate each turn of independence. Each contact marker counts as 1. So if Luck had 3 artillery units in contact with it, his rating here would be down to a 4, and he can only command 4 white stripe units, not the full 7. So that you can't put 15 artillery units in command with 1 leader. The leader can only handle it at most whatever its command rating is. Otherwise, when you have this artillery unit in contact, it'll fire pretty much like the mortars or like the organic artillery. You'll have to have an in-command unit by this formation can spot, and then it can fire. One unfortunate thing with artillery is if you roll a 9 on your attack, that's the automatic miss, and in addition, the contact marker is removed from the leader and it goes back to the artillery park. So you'll have to roll again next turn to get back into contact with the artillery unit. That means during the game that you sort of have a constant attrition of artillery contacts, that 1 out of every 10 will be a total flub. Not only will the attack miss, but the contact marker goes away and you'll have to roll for it again on the next turn. You can roll, suppose somebody else that's not Luck wants to get into contact with this unit right here, and it's in contact, so it's a much lower chance. They have to roll a 3 or less. You can actually get in contact with units from other divisions too, but then you add another -2, so that usually doesn't happen too quickly. It can take several turns for that to come about. Let's go take a look at artillery in action. All right, we're back to our example here, and we see that 736 Commander Krug has 3 artillery units in contact with it. And I have a contact pending, but that shouldn't be it. It's in contact, so we're going to flip that to the in contact side. If it's the 736 activation, Krug is now down to, he's got like 7 other units he can activate instead of 10, because 3 of them are taken out by these contact markers. But he can fire with his artillery, spotted by any unit that's in command by Krug during the activation. So let's try it. He's got Gwiazdowski, which is in an artillery park, and then he's got some naval coastal batteries, which don't have to be in parks, but still fire indirect. That's their special deal. So Riva, that should be, where is that? That's like, oh, here it is, right down here. So let's say we want to shoot at this unit that we've weakened here already. Will you pull up the attack wizard here? The range is 8, but that's not a problem. The range is 39. It's spotted by either of these units. We can see into it. And let's take a look at what this is showing us here. It's going to be a straightforward attack. Forest has no effect on indirect fire. So there's going to be no tank. So it's basically is a 4, which is not a bad attack. We'll roll it. We roll 1, possible suppression. Let's take our chances. We survive it, not a problem. However, we attacked with strength 4, so we get to place a barrage marker here, a light barrage. If the strength had been 6, then it would have been a heavy barrage. Notice now there's an additional -1 to its quality rating, so it might be harder to withstand survival results, or the suppression, the possible suppression results. All right, that's 1. Let's keep working on it. Here's Colville. I think that's right down here. Well, maybe what we'll do is try to put a marker on this unit as well. So it's going to be base. Well, this is actually is a little bit strange because at range 3, they can't fire indirect. You have to be at least 4 away. So we're going to have to pick another target here. Let's take a shot at this unit here. We can get a nice barrage marker on that. We'll see the modifiers a -3, or it says 2, so we're going to have to fix that because it should be a 3, unless the marker is wrong. And we'll roll it. A 7, no effect, but we do get to put a barrage marker on it. So often you'll be firing artillery just to get the barrage marker. The chances of a result are low. Our last battery right here is the Gibidoze, and that's located in an artillery park way down here. So we can attack with that unit, and we'll pop up to here. It'll measure the range for us. And maybe we'll want to put it here. Range 13, not a problem. Actually, I might fire at that mortar over there and kind of clog this area up. Why don't we do that? It can be spotted by who? Let's see. Not him, because there's a barrage marker blocking the line of sight. I'm going to undo that. Let's trace the line of sight. Let's see if we can trace the line of sight over to here. I'm going to pull out the tool here. Okay, the module's giving me fits because it's going on and off the display. I would have to turn the display off. Let's just do it manually. Let's see where the line of sight goes. And I see it's nicking 1, 2, 3, 4 blocking. It's going through 3 hedgerows and a light barrage, so he cannot see him. We can't take the shot there. Huh. Interesting. So this barrage blocks his line of sight. If I had thought a little harder about it, I would have taken this shot first and then put that shot on there. Curses. Foiled again. Let's see, maybe just see if we can get a line of sight from this guy. That's much better. We have a line of sight from there. It only goes through 1 city hex. It's an observation post. So he can go through 3 blocked terrain hexes, and that's still an open line of sight. So we're okay. We can take the shot. Let's go down and do it. We'll attack with him. Again, this observation post is spotting the fire, and it's part of his formation, and it's in command, so that's not a problem. And let's fire at the mortar. And we'll select a target through the wizard here. A base of 3. How does that work? -3 for the city, +1 because of stacking, and +1 because of the base defense of the mortar. These are kind of vulnerable. So let's take a roll. Possible suppression on a 1. We'll roll it. It's not suppressed. We do put a barrage marker in that hex. Now, one additional rule for these barrages is that if this unit were to suffer a combat result of some sort, suppression or cohesion hit, let's just suppress it for fun. Let's just say it failed its roll and it's suppressed. Now, every other unit in that hex has to check their quality rating. It's like as if they were to receive a possible suppression result. So the commando will roll. It needs a 7. It got a 2. Fine. You can see that this 7 quality rating of the commandos is really nice, the Marines. So they're all fine. But there could possibly be a hex of a lot of worse quality units, and they might all end up getting suppressed from a successful barrage. So that was 3 shots. We took 1 there to no effect. We covered him up with a light barrage, and we did or did not do a suppressed result of that mortar with that. So these small units with a strength of 3 or 4, they're not overwhelming. There are some artillery units that have company bonus possibilities and have a 4 or 5. Those things hit pretty darn hard. You look at this one right here. If it were in an artillery park, it's not in one, so it can't do indirect fire. It can hit with a 6, just like this unit right here. By the way, these units, these brown 4s that the Allies have, are probably the most valuable units that they have. So don't lose those when you're the Allied. You'll find that they're firing indirect once, sometimes twice, every turn, every day of the game, the 7 or 8 days long this game lasts. will have a huge effect. All right, let's finish up now. We've done artillery. I've not covered every single rule, but I've given you a basic idea of how it works. And we've done indirect fire here. I think we have one more thing left to do, and that is opportunity fire. I knew there was something. All right, what is opportunity fire? Opportunity fire is defending units, that is non-phasing units, shooting because of something the phasing player does. They can shoot at anybody within their fire zone. Their fire zone consists of all the hexes that are within their range to which they have a direct line of sight. That is, hexes they could potentially shoot at. Now, how do you reduce the enemy fire zone? One method we've already learned, and that is to put a barrage marker on it, because when you put a barrage marker on a unit, it has a maximum range of 1, and it can't see these things, can't shoot at them, so the fire zone is cut. The other way to reduce a fire zone is that if a unit is adjacent to an enemy unit, its fire zone is immediately reduced to 1. So by moving an allied unit here, this pillbox can now only shoot at adjacent hexes. It's sort of distracted by these guys, can't look out. There are a few extra modifiers for opportunity fire, and the main ones are these. First of all, you cannot roll for a company bonus when you're shooting opportunity fire, so they won't hit quite as hard as during a normal direct fire. The most important modifier will be, is the enemy unit moving from a fire zone to a fire zone? And that fire zone doesn't have to be projected by that unit. It could be projected by any unit. If so, there's a +2 to the fire. So if I were moving as an ally unit from here to here, this unit is in a fire zone, this unit is in a fire zone, there would be a +2 to the strength, so it'd be hitting me with a 6 instead of a 4. If you move from fire zone to non-fire zone, then there's a -1. So if here's a range of 3, if I had a unit here and it was moving here for opportunity fire, if it's successful, he would be at a -1 for moving from a fire zone to a non-fire zone hex. So does every unit get to fire? No, they get the option of firing, but you have to say, I'm going to attempt to fire opportunity fire, and then you have to roll your quality rating or less in order to actually take a shot. With a quality rating of 2, this pillbox is not going to be conducting a lot of opportunity fire. Notice that if it had 2 cohesion hits, it would be at another -1, and its quality rating would be 1. So these markers do add up. If it were suppressed, it has no fire zone, so it's not going to fire opportunity fire at all. What are the causes of opportunity fire? Movement, assault, which we'll cover in an upcoming video, and an engineering action, and we'll cover those later too, such as digging in, making entrenchments, laying minefields, removing minefields. Suppose I had an engineer unit in this hex, and it wanted to remove a minefield in that hex. That's an engineering action. Is that an opportunity fire trigger, or does it cause opportunity fire? Possibly. It's within range. It's an engineering action. It's considered fire zone to fire zone because it starts in 1 and it ends in 1. So this unit will be shooting at him with a strength of 6. It would be -2 for the range against the soft target, 0 here, -1 for that, -2. -2 as well for the town hex, +1 for the engineer, so it'd be hitting him on a 3 or so. Not great. You probably want to put a barrage marker on him to keep him from firing opportunity fire at the engineer while you're trying to clear this area. So let's do a couple of examples of that based on our module again. Okay, let's suppose that this tank wants to move in. I'm not saying this is a good idea. This is just an example. You're out of artillery for whatever reason. You can't suppress it with that, so he's going to move in to move adjacent to this unit. That way he'll have a much better shot at it because it'll be range 0, and this guy's his fire zone will be reduced to 1 because he will be adjacent to this enemy unit. So let's just charge him in here and see if that's going to work. Let me get rid of that. All right, we're moving into this hex. He is out of range. So moving from this hex to that hex is not an opportunity fire trigger because he cannot see him here. Now, however, he is in range. He's moving to here. This is going to cost him 2 movement points. This is a possible opportunity fire. So what we'll do is we'll roll, see if we can get his quality rating. He rolled a 0. He gets it. So let's put him back into this hex, and let's conduct our opportunity fire. We'll pull up our wizard again. and select him. It's going to be opportunity fire, and now we have to check, is he moving from a fire zone to a fire zone or not? And the fact is, he is moving from a fire zone to a fire zone, so we'll check that box. That's a +2. So -2 for the range. It's a maximum range of 3, and it's firing at a armored target, so that'll be a -2 modifier total. -3 for the defense, +2 for fire zone to fire zone. We make our roll 2, no effect. All right, so it successfully moves to here. Now it wants to move from here to here. Let's again roll for opportunity fire. A 0. Wow, this guy's great. So it takes a shot, and this is going to be a slightly better attack because the range is not at the maximum range. It's a range of 2. Fire zone to fire zone, he needs a 2. The roll's an 8, a miss. Now this unit successfully conducts the move. He took 2 shots but missed both times. His fire zone is now 1. So if I wanted to, I can move him from there to there to there. This isn't opportunity fire because he can only shoot. His fire zone only extends out to 1 hex. So you can see how moving a unit up to kind of keep this guy down to a fire zone of 0 will allow you to get around units without being subject to opportunity fire constantly. If we go back and do another opportunity fire example, let's just say this is not a good idea, but we're just going to pretend it's the activation of this brigade. They decide they want to dig into the city here. Why they would do that, who knows? He's going to conduct an engineering action. That gives this unit an opportunity fire trigger. It's within range, and it's an engineering action. He needs to roll a 6. He rolls a 3. Successful. He gets to take a shot. Notice that, and it won't matter for these units because they just have 1 step, but there is no company bonus when you're firing opportunity fire. So if he were full company with 2, he still wouldn't be able to roll for the bonus. Let's pull up the wizard. It's a range 2. Aha! See, it's stopping me from doing it because there's an enemy unit here, and its fire zone would normally be 1, so it couldn't shoot. So let's get that guy out of here for a minute. All right, we're back to it again. Now it's going to work just fine. So he's in -3 for the city, -1 for the range, fire zone to fire zone, and it's a 2. He rolls and he misses. So this guy could then try to dig in or do whatever he was doing with his engineering action. Okay, we covered a lot here. We did line of sight. We talked about blocking terrain, blocking hex sides. We talked about all the different fire types. We looked at some of the modifiers. We looked at the results. We talked about mortars, artillery, opportunity fire. I am 100% sure I didn't cover every rule, so you will have to read the rules in there, but hopefully this has given you a basic idea of how fire combat works in the Grand Tactical Series. The next episode, number 4, will be coming up, and it is on assault. Complicated, but not nearly as many things to talk about, so hopefully it'll be a shorter video.